Hello everyone and welcome to another video on JavaScript programming. Kaushal this side from SimpliCode, and today we are going to discuss async and await in JavaScript. Before we begin, make sure that you have subscribed to our YouTube channel and press that bell icon to never miss an update from SimpliCode. So without any further delay, let's get started. Async await works with promises in JavaScript. If you are not clear with promises by now, I recommend you to watch the previous video on promises in this playlist, and it will be easier for you guys to understand async await in JavaScript. Now, async await is just a syntactical sugar wrapped around promises in JavaScript. Basically, it makes it easier to work with promises in JavaScript. We already know that using promises might be a bit tricky, or we can say more prolonged sometimes, because we have to create so many functions and promises in JavaScript. So before we move on to async await, let me take you guys through this code which has promises in it, and then we'll see how to use async await in JavaScript. So here is a code for promises in JavaScript. Here in this code we have two functions, make order and process order. The make order function returns a promise and it will resolve it if the user enters black coffee. Otherwise, it will reject it on any other type of coffee. Then we have another function here for processing the order, and it will always resolve. So this function is quite simple and it will add some extra information to the order. So here is the code for extra information. It will print this on console. So let's move ahead and we'll look at how we call these functions using promises, and then we'll change the same code using async await. Let me do it guys first and then I'll explain it to you. So here's the code. Now what we did here is we called the make order function and we'll pass here black coffee as an argument to make it successful. Then we have used the dot then because we are using promises here, and then we have the order that will be returned by a promise. So which in this case is a string that says here is your coffee. This is the string if I show you. So this is the string it will return, and then we have written here console.log order has been received. It will be printed on the console. And then we have called the process order function, and we are going to process the order that we received, and the reason we are returning this is because, so you can see here we are returning this process order function. The reason behind it is because we are using promises here. Then we have changed the event here, so we have used the dot then operator again. We are going to receive the response from the process order above. In this case we have taken it as processed order and we have logged whatever response we will get here. The next thing we did here is to use the catch block to catch any type of error we get. For example, if the user says he wants a latte, not black coffee, then it will give an error and it will say that we serve black coffee only. So this is the code for error. So that's all, and we are calling these functions. So if we save this program, let's say we are saving it, and if we go back to our console, so here you can see the output says making request for a black coffee, and then it says order has been processed, then it says processing order, and then at last it says extra information plus here is your coffee, have a nice day. That's how we wanted it to be, right? Now if the user says he wants a latte in place of black coffee, so let's check it out, and what we'll do is we'll pass the argument here as latte instead of black coffee. So save it now. Here you can see it says making request for latte. So firstly it made a request for latte and then it returned the error. The error says sorry, we serve black coffee only. So it's working totally fine, and this is how promises actually work in JavaScript. All the different codes here are executed and it is waiting for the previous code to execute before moving on to the next one. So that's what we exactly wanted here. Now if you look at all this code here, which is obviously not too much confusing, but we have to use more dot than here, right? We have to go through a lot of nesting here, and it could be done easily with async await in JavaScript. And one more issue with promises is if we want to use the parameter inside this first dot then. So if we want to use a parameter here, what we have to do is we have to first create a variable and we have to assign something to that variable, which is not an easy task, right? But with async and await, we can do it more efficiently and we don't have to worry about all the dot thens and all. So now we'll do the same program with async and await, and we'll do it here only below this program. we'll write this piece of code with the help of async await, and we'll see how easy it is to use async and await in JavaScript. So let me comment this first, guys. Now, the first thing we need to keep in mind with async and await is we need a function to use these terms. For example, let's create a simple function here first. So we'll write here function. Let's say the function name is func1, and then we have the body of this function. So this is a basic function here, and we'll put all our asynchronous code inside here in this function. But we need to tell JavaScript that this function will work asynchronously. For that, we have to write a keyword here before function. So what we'll do is we'll write here async, and this is the syntax. Now JavaScript will know that this function is an asynchronous function, and it will handle this function accordingly. Now inside of this function, what we'll do is we'll call our different methods here. So we'll call the make order method here, and then we'll call the process order method as well. So let's do it first. Let's call the make order method first. So we'll write here make order, and we'll pass an argument here. So the argument will be, let's say, black coffee. Fine. Now we have called the function make order here. All we have to do is we have to write await in front of this function, which will make the code wait until this make order function executes. Then only the next part will be executed. So we'll write here await, and this make order function now will return the resolve section of the first promise we made. So we'll store this inside a variable. So we'll write here, let's create a variable here. We'll write where order. Fine. Because we have all this code inside of an asynchronous function, what will happen is as soon as JavaScript finds that await keyword, so as soon as JavaScript finds this await keyword, it will leave this function and start doing other works inside of this program. Remember, it will leave this whole function. It's not something like the set timeout method. It is different from that. As soon as the make order function is done executing, it will come back to this function and returns the result into this order variable. Next up, what we'll do is we'll write here console.log, and what we want to log here is order has been received. Now, if we look at the promises example previously and compare these two codes, so if you can see here, we are done with this part. So this is what it looks like while working with async await in JavaScript. Now we'll see that we have received the order with pretty easy syntax, right? Next up, what we have to do is we have to process this order. This means that we have to write the code for the second than we used in the promises example, right? The syntax will remain the same. For that, we'll write here where processed order is equals to await. We'll use the await keyword again, and then we'll write here process order. Fine. And then we'll pass the argument as order. So we are passing this variable as an argument to this process order function. In the next line, we'll write here console.log, and we'll copy this. This line is the same. So we'll copy it from here and we'll paste it here. Fine. Now we have used the variable processed order to process the order, and then we know that as soon as the processing is done, we want it to log it in here. So we are done with this, and all we need to do now is call the asynchronous function, and we are good to go. So let's call this function first. For that, we'll write here func1, and now save this program. So here you can see it says process order is not defined. So okay, we have to remove this E here. Now save this, and here you can see we have the exact same output as we had in the promises example, and with this we can say the async await are working totally fine. Now the question arising in your mind may be that we didn't do anything for the catch block here, right? What if the user enters latte in place of black coffee? So let's try to do it once. So what we'll do is we'll write here latte and save it. So you can see the first function is working fine. It says making request for a latte, and then it says sorry, we serve black coffee only. So this is a error, and caught error in promises. So we have to do something about this error, right? Now the async and await in JavaScript actually has two blocks, one for resolving and the other one for error or reject. So we can say, like the then and catch in promises, we have try and catch in async await. So what we have to do here is we have to put all this piece of code inside the try block. So let's do it first. What we'll do here is we'll write here try. So what we are doing is we are asking the computer to try this piece of code if this is fine or not. And then we have another block catch. Fine. So we'll write the code for rejection here inside this catch block. What we'll do is we'll write here catch and we'll pass an argument here. So we'll write here error and then we'll log this error on a console. So we'll write here console.log error. So we have passed a parameter here, and the moment it will find any error, it will leave the try block and moves on to the catch block, and the output will be an error. So save it, and you can see it here on the console. It says sorry, we serve black coffee only. So this is how we can use async await in JavaScript. It's not necessary to use it over promises, but the syntax is relatively clean and easy to understand, right? As you can see here. All we have to keep in mind while using async await is we have to use a function and wrap up all the data inside it. So keep this thing in mind that we have to use a function always, and we have to wrap up all this data inside a single function with the help of try and catch block. Try and catch block are pretty easy to use, right? We'll go through try and catch block in the next video as well, when we'll go through error handling. Another important thing I want to mention here before we end up this video is, guys, it may happen that you might don't use these topics quite frequently while working on the front end of a website. But if you get to answer these questions during an interview, and these topics are pretty crucial if you are learning JavaScript. So whether it be async await or promises or callback functions, you need all of them in JavaScript. So please go through these topics carefully. And that's all for this video, guys. See you in the next one, where we will go through error handling in JavaScript. If you liked this video, do give it a thumbs up. If you have any doubts, do let us know in the comments below. Share it with your friends and don't forget to subscribe SimpliCode. Thank you.